Gaining notoriety for schemes that would squeeze millions out from his targets, his operations were so intricate and widespread that the best investigators in the world couldn't keep up. With a talent for managing and manipulating people, no data in the world was safe from who the FBI considered to be their worst nightmare. In this video, we're taking a look at the FBI's worst nightmare finally caught. Before we jump to it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to ring the notification bell for all our newest videos. As technology, along with the advent of faster and better computers, revolutionized the world at the turn of the 21st century, so did New Age hackers who adapted more cunning and severe methods of cyber piracy. One computer specialist in particular became the subject of an international case deeply rooted in a new kind of Cold War between the US and organized criminals in the former Soviet bloc. His name is Maxim Igorovich Popov, and without knowing it, became the FBI's worst nightmare and best weapon. Growing up 2 hours west of Kyiv, in the streets of Zhytomyr, a city that had existed for more than 1,000 years, at a sensitive time in Ukraine in the post-Soviet era, Max was drawn to computers very early in his life, learning the basics on a Ukrainian-made IBM XT clone called the Poisk 1. When he turned 15, his dad brought home a PC and a modem, which would be Popov's first chance to go online. He quickly started living the life based on his favorite 1995 movie Hackers, the one with the young Angelina Jolie. He knew then that he was going to be a computer outlaw and aimed to earn plenty of money while at it. In the 1990s, former Soviet states had plenty of smart young talent. From programmers and young hackers struggling to achieve high-tech career opportunities, it was a race of finding their own path towards achieving that early dot-com gold rush. By finding them all online, Popov realized one thing about Eastern European hackers. There were lots of them, and all they really wanted was a job. In the 90s, there were only limited possibilities for people to make money or make a living using your technical brain. The niche market may have developed in Russia in the later years of the decade and gradually became a reality as the 2000s came near, but earlier on, no one had any idea just how marketable programming had become. This proved much more in Ukraine, where people were impoverished and could only struggle to maintain what they could for their needs of the day. Like many hackers at the time, Popov began making money by cashing out stolen credit card numbers, using his remarkable speaking skills and perfect English diction to phone in fraudulent orders to US cell phone and computer retailers. He had gone on and studied English and German languages in Kyiv National Linguistic University, so it was easy for him to set himself apart from most contemporary hackers. He may not have been quite technical, but he had a talent for manipulating and managing people, and a gift of language with which he trained with. Local Ukrainian gangsters learned of Max's online scam and tried to strong-arm him for straight-up cash. While most would cower and opt for alternative work in the face of goons, Popov took this on as a means of trying out an alternative means of scamming for more money instead. With his crew in tow, they would hack into a company's computers and acquire customer data. After which, Popov himself would contact the company and offer them his service as a security consultant, keeping the intrusions a secret in exchange for hard cash. This manner of extortion became a huge means of his earlier profit. This hacking wave of extortion continued as in July 2000, his team hacked into a company based in Washington, D.C. called eMoney, an early version of most electronic payment providers we find today. His team scoured the company's records and stole credit card data on up to 38,000 customers. Next, they hit Western Union's website, stealing more than 16,000 vital points of information from customers, such as names, addresses, passwords, and credit card data. In the same way, Popov would contact these companies and offer to stop the ongoing hacks and delete the stolen data for consulting fees, worth $50,000 to $500,000. Despite Popov's sure method, Western Union had publicly announced the data breach, eliminating his chances of acquiring payment for hush money. Meanwhile, eMoney may have led him on, pondering on the possible payment while secretly communicating with the FBI. This was the first time the FBI had started monitoring his activities. All the while, however, Popov felt pressured in his hometown. His recent scams had not worked, and the local thugs were closing in. This was when he started contemplating an unexpected move: to turn himself in to the American police. Popov had figured that a skilled hacker such as himself would be given a second chance by American authorities, reforming himself into American society and even reinvent himself as a computer security expert in the land of milk and honey. In 2001, now 20 years old, Max walked inside the US Embassy in London. With his nerdy, youthful looks, no one could have expected that he was about to become the first defector in the new Cold War of the 21st century. Through a series of communication and secret arrangements with the FBI that lasted 4 months, Popov was now being escorted on board a flight to the US. He had left his parents and his whole life behind, and was excited to live his new life with his well-paying job, being a computer security expert to the US government, which would eventually lead him to an internet startup and be among the wealthy few who thrived in the early .com era, or so he thought. As soon as Popov's plane landed, the FBI agents who accompanied him now stalked him like he was prey. He was placed in an isolation room and would later be faced with a federal prosecutor, a public defendant, and an offer he couldn't refuse. Popov was asked by the US government to be their informant, to try and rope in his former illegal associates, and build cases for the FBI, or else he'd be thrown in prison. For a time, Popov pretended he was cooperating, when in truth, he had been warning his partners back home, using Russian slang, warning them that he'd been compromised. Logs of these communications were translated 3 months later, and Popov was thrown in a small county jail to face his cybercrimes. Popov thought of himself, "F you have no idea who you're dealing with." Meanwhile, in an FBI office in Santa Ana, California, a newly minted FBI agent named Ernest E.J. Hilbert was keenly aware of Popov's situation and knew what the US government didn't: that the US needed Popov. He had known of the rising cases of hacking coming from Eastern Europe. Hacking was turning into a new kind of cool profession, and Hilbert knew that Popov was just the right man to help him combat it. Hilbert's first case was cybercrime related, and tracked the hacking incident to a prolific hacker in Russia's Ural Mountains, and would develop a ploy to lure the hacker to Seattle, where the FBI had caught him. Hilbert understood hackers, and he knew that Popov understood Eastern European hackers even more. Popov could move through underground chat rooms, forge relationships, and feed the FBI much-needed evidence and information. Hilbert offered Popov a chance to set up strangers to whom he had no loyalty with. And in 2002, Popov signed the plea deal, making him an FBI mole. In an operation dubbed Ant City, Popov was procured from jail by the FBI and brought to an office building with a small room filled with PCs for him. He would hang out in underground chat rooms online and portray himself as a big-time Ukrainian scammer looking for stolen credit cards. This strategy of controlled buying would lead the FBI to a number of cyber cases with arrests done locally in Ukraine. Popov and Hilbert would lead online and actual sting operations that took down a number of notorious cyber operations, such as the biggest data hack of 2003, when credit card payment processor Data Processing International exposed up to 8 million credit cards. After asking around message boards, Popov located a 21-year-old Russian student named Rez, who became a broker between Popov and the 3 hackers behind the illegal act. The FBI would eventually identify and catch the culprits through Popov and Hilbert's techniques. After 8 months of being under Operation Ant City, on the government's recommendation, Popov was sentenced to time served and 3 years of court supervision. Agent Hilbert arranged for the FBI to provide Popov an apartment in California and a $1,000 stipend. But Popov was anxious and wanted to go home. After getting permission to visit Ukraine, provided that he would be back in the US by a given date, Hilbert drove Popov to the airport, knowing this just might be the last time he would see Max. True to form, Popov never came back. Operation Ant City closed down after taking close to 500,000 stolen credit cards off the black market, and having alerted over 700 companies that had been breached by the Eastern Hacking Bloc. Max Popov eventually started a cybersecurity business called Cybercrime Monitoring Systems, and had turned the skills he learned from Operation Ant City into a legitimate and practical use. He's back in Eastern Europe, and may even have had some hacking action in the last decade. However, in this story of redemption, it seems that one may never lose the skills that turn toward the untrodden path, but one is always able to use these skills to create something meaningful and above the board. What do you think about the FBI's worst nightmare finally caught? We'd love to hear from you by placing your comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the notification bell for more stories.